Good day, everyone. I am EROL CROOC, and I am here to discuss the topic that I choose, which are the social learning theory and cognitive theory. Social learning theory. Learning theory that proposes that learning occurs in the social context by observing the behavior of a model along with the consequences of the behavior. While cognitive theory proposes human agency, observational learning, and a triadic reciprocal determinism. These two theories that try to explain learning in the social context, while the main position being that people acquire new behaviors by observation. The two theories focus solely on behavior in terms of what can be learned, setting aside other things such as knowledge and cognitive skills. For deeper understanding, let's talk about first social learning theory. Psychologists have always been fascinated with how human beings learn and the complexities involved in the process. And this give birth to this learning theory. A Canadian psychologist, Albert Bantura, came up with the social learning theory to help us understand how people learn. So, the behaviorist proposed that learning is derived from one's interaction with the environment. Bantura agrees certain elements of behaviorism but added not all learning is a result directory reinforcement. Now, if one only learned by something but doing it by themselves and not by observing others, learning would be a laborious process. He also proposed that people can also be learned by observing other people. Like for example, a child watches their parent folding the laundry. They later pick some clothes and imitate folding the clothes. Um, Before I continue my discussion, let's talk about um, Albert Bantura. Who is Albert Bantura? Albert Bantura was a Canadian-American psychologist who was responsible for contribution to the field of education and several fields of psychology. He is known as the originator of social learning theory. Social learning theory meaning it emphasizes the importance of observing, modeling, and imitating the behaviors, attitudes, and emotional reaction of others. A theory of learning process and social behavior which proposes that new behavior can be acquired by observing and imitating others. Individuals often model or imitate the behavior of others, especially if it's someone the individual look up to and admires. For example, an individual who witnessed someone they respect commit a crime, who was then prosecuted for the crime, was more likely to commit the crime itself. Next is the three core concept of social learning theory. First is the observational learning. Second is the concept of mental state and or the state of mind. This is also called intrinsic reinforcement. And last is the learning is the independent of behavior change. Now let's talk about observational learning. It is the process of learning by watching the behavior of others. To demonstrate observational learning, Bandura conducted Bobo doll experiment. Now, in the Bobo doll experiment, a number of children which is selected were tested in one room were actually taken one at a time with an adult, a number of toys, and a Bobo doll. So the remaining children were taken to another room, again, one at a time to be with toys, another adult, and another Bobo dolls. So the difference is that one adult was aggressive towards the doll and the other adult ignored the doll completely. So one adult would actually beat the doll up and verbally abuse the doll, and the other um, adult just ignore it. Um, it is observed that children who witness aggressive behavior by adults also demonstrate similar sort of aggressive behavior towards the doll. While in the children who are actually with the adult who do nothing towards the doll didn't demonstrate any aggressive behavior towards the doll. So Bandura identified the three model of observational learning. The live model where someone learn from an actual individual behavior. Next is the symbolic model where is someone learn behavior displayed in the films, television, and other um, media like radio. And last is the verbal instructional model where someone actually learn merely from behavioral description from somebody else. Next is the intrinsic reinforcement. Bandura noted that external environmental reinforcement was not the only factors to influence learning and behavior. And he realized that reinforcement does not always come from outside sources. Your own mental state and motivation plays an important role in determining whether a behavior is learned or not. Next is the learning and behavior change. Learning is a behavior doesn't automatically mean the person will execute it. Changing or applying a new behavior must be of value to the person to want to apply what they've learned. Meaning, we ourselves can help us with the change we want to be achieved. We will develop new behaviors because of the learnings we have learned. So, that learning occurs through observation, imitation, modeling, or learning in other words. Next is there are four steps in social theory. First is the attention. Attention, in order to learn, you need to be paying attention. Anything that distract your attention is going to have negative effect on observational learning. Second is the retention. The ability to store information is also an important part of learning process. Retention can be affected by a number of factors, but the ability to pull up information later and act on its vital to observational learning. Third is the reproduction. Once you have paid attention to the model and retained the information, it is actually perform the behavior you observe. Further practice the learned behavior leads to the improvement and skills advancement. And lastly, the motivation. Finally, in order for observational learning to be successful, you have to be motivated to imitate the behavior that have been modeled. Reinforcement, punishment plays an important role in motivation. The next topic that I discuss is about cognitive theory. Cognitive theories are characterized by their focus on the idea that how and what people think leads to the arousal of emotion and that certain thoughts and beliefs to lead to disturbed emotion and behaviors and other leads to healthy emotion and adaptive behavior. Meaning, this theory is about the way in which the brain makes connection while remembering what is learned. The ability to reason locally is an excellent example of cognition, problem solving, and making judgment about information. For example, one study suggests that someone's motivation to learn help determine how often their mind wandering during a lesson. Next is social cognitive theory. Social cognitive theory provides opportunities for social support through instilling expectation, self-efficacy, and using observational learning and other reinforcement to achieve behavior change. It means having observational learning and self-efficacy, and it helps to bring about change in a person, and it also help us make a person do well. Last is the cognitive theory. Cognitive theories of crime. Cognitive theories of crime explain criminal behavior as a defect in moral thinking, thoughts, processes, and mental development. Cognitive theories also help us to understand how an individual's personality and intelligence level are linked to delinquency. In the next slide, you will see the reference of these two topics. If you want to know more about these topics, kindly visit to the reference for more information. Success and failure are largely self-defined in terms of personal standards. The higher self-standards, the more likely we will give attainments be viewed as failures, regardless of what others might think. This quotation is provided by Social Foundation of Thoughts and Action, a social cognitive theory, 1986. And this will end my presentation about social learning theory and cognitive theory. Thank you for listening.